Hello, it is Helen with So Kind of Wonderful, and this is our month 12 of the Floral Felicity Sew Along. So this month is all about sewing your different zones together, and you may have already been doing that throughout the sew along as we completed each zone. So our book is organized by zones. And so if we look at zone 12, at this point you have sewn everything. So it's all done. So now you have it's time to make a decision. Are you making one quilt, or are you going to make 4 smaller ones? So I've already made Floral Felicity once as a big quilt, and Jenny's made it once. So at this point, we are going to have these as 4 smaller individual quilts. The kits, so if you received a kit, there is enough fabric to put a 3-inch border around your whole big quilt. If you are doing the 4 smaller quilts, there's enough fabric to add a 1.5-inch border around each of the smaller miniature quilts. This will float all of the blocks and give them a little bit of space from the edge, and it just makes for a nicer finish. So we've been sewing blocks together as we went. Here is, let's see, this one is my first section, and you can see I have it sewn together. I haven't added my border pieces yet, so that's what I'll be working on here. So that's my first one. Here's my second one, all done. And I love this because it's managed my blocks for me. I just had to sew them together as I went. Here is, now this is where I didn't sew this, but here is the top section of the quilt. And I just need to sew that to this piece. So that's what I'm working on. These get sewn together. And then you can see I have the last section up on my design wall. So I actually lost those 2. They're in this room somewhere. So I need to find them. So I'm going to be sewing this together, sewing this. I will be adding my 1.5-inch border pieces. And then I'll come back and show you how I have my 4 different miniature quilts done. If you're making the big quilt, then go ahead and sew your 4 sections together. The pattern's really good. It walks you through sewing those together. This is all in zone 12 of Floral Felicity. So right here. Got really good diagrams for sewing it together. Okay, I'll find my blocks. I'll get my sections sewn together and add the borders. When you're adding your borders, you can follow the directions in the book, cut them exactly to size, or you can measure, take a couple measurements on the width, take some on the length, and adjust your border strips to match your own blocks that you've been sewing. So sew the different zones together and then measure. So you know yourself as a sewer. You know if you are a true 1/4-inch seam sewer, it'll match the measurements in the book. You also know if you need to give yourself an extra 1/2 inch or take a little bit off because you have a little bit larger seam. So whatever you do, just make it work how you always do. Okay, I'll come back on and show you what I got done. All right, here is my first mini quilt. So this is zones 1, 2, and 3. And I have gone ahead and cut all 18 1.5-inch times with the fabric strips. I only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I only need 5 strips for this first section. So I went ahead and sewed 3 of them together, and I have a angled seam So I sewed them end to end. I will cut two 57 and a half, 57 and a fourth. I will cut two 57 and a fourth inch pieces off of these two. And then my other, these are on the sides. And then my top pieces are 39 and a half. So I have two with the fabrics I've cut 39 and a half. So I'm going to sew sides first, press the seam towards the borders, and then sew the top and bottom, press the seam towards the borders. I will do this for all four of them. I did notice when I sewed my next one, I'll show you. All right, when I sewed this one together, there's a lot of seams, and when I started from the bottom and I sewed up, and you can see I have an extra 1/4 inch on the dragonfly block where it didn't quite go together. Rather than stretching, you can see that all of this is top sashing. I'm going to go ahead and trim that 1/4 inch off here. So when you're deciding, you know, how should I sew this together? For this one, it made sense to sew it from the bottom because I couldn't really cut off those without losing some of the character that's sewn into the block. Whereas I could trim off the top of the dragonfly block. Okay, so just something to think about when you start sewing these things together, because we have a lot of seams. Okay, so I'm going to sew my sides on. I'll do that for all four, and then I'll come back and show you progress. All right, I thought of something else we should talk about. If you are going to measure your sections, remember that you sew the sides on first and then top and bottom. And when you're measuring, like the top and bottom of this section is 39 and a half. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, so it should measure 39 and a half. Not until after I sew the side pieces on. And after you sew those on, those are each an inch finished, plus you have your seam allowance. So technically, this right now should be not 39 and a half, it should be 37 and a half. So let's see how close I am. And I'm going to measure in a couple spots. Okay, just shy of 37 and a half. And then I'll measure down here. Yep, so 37 and a half. I will go ahead and sew on the sides. Oh, I should measure top and bottom. Oh, I haven't done that yet. All right, this is supposed to be 57 and a fourth. You would not have it hanging up. Well, maybe you would, but let's see what it is. Okay, this actually should be 57 and a fourth. Oh, yes, we are really close. 57 and an eighth, and I know I can adjust that. And, okay, so that will work for me. Okay, all right, just another little tip on measuring. Sometimes it's just easier just to give yourself a little bit extra half inch. Just know if you've cut it bigger, try not to stretch it to fit that, or it will create waves on the edges of your mini quilts or your big quilt. It's better to cut it exact and pin it in place and sew. Okay, I promised some update on the sewing, and you can see this is my first of my mini quilts. It's all done. I have my sides sewn on. I was able to finish 3 of the 4. I did find that my missing blocks are actually at Jenny's house in Utah. So no worries, I will get that done. So in June, what we're working on is assembling our quilt. And if you can even get it started, start to quilt it, call your long armor, get on their schedule, so that we can show off all our quilts in July and post your progress to the Floral Felicity Facebook page. We are going to switch that Facebook group to just a general Sew Kind of Wonderful free spirit collaboration sew along page, because we have another sew along that starts in July, and it's for Butterfly Fields. So that way we all just stay in the same place, collaborating and sharing inspiration for each other. All right, so assemble your blocks. Hopefully you've kept track of all of them, and you know, we'll look for all of your progress photos. Okay, happy times with Floral Felicity this year. It has been it's been 12 months since we started this, but by doing just a little bit every month, it has really made sewing up this whole quilt very doable and approachable.